Hello students, good morning everybody. In this video we are going to see about capacitors in series and parallel. Capacitors in series. You all know that a capacitor is a device which is used for storing electric charges and electric energy. Consider three capacitors of capacitance C1, C2 and C3 connected in series with the battery of voltage V. As soon as the battery is connected to the capacitors in series, what happens means electrons of charge minus Q are transferred from the negative terminal of the right plate of C3 to the which pushes the electrons of same amount of minus Q from left plate of C3 to the right plate of C2 due to electrostatic induction. This diagram shows you the diagram for capacitors connected in series. After that one, the left side or left plate of C2 pushes the charges of minus Q to the right plate of C1 to the right plate of C1, which induces positive charges on plus Q on the left plate of C1. At the same time, electrons of charge minus Q are transferred from the left plate of C1 to the positive terminal of the battery. By these processes, what will happen means each capacitor C1, C2 and C3 carries this or stores the same amount of charge Q. The capacitance of the capacitors are different, so the voltage across each capacitor is also different, and the voltage across C1 is represented as V1, the voltage across C2 is represented as V2, and the voltage across C3 is represented as V3. The sum of these three voltages is equal to the voltage supplied by the battery. So I can write V is equal to V1 plus V2 plus V3. But you all know that Q is equal to CV. So V is equal to Q by C. So I can write V1 is equal to Q by C1, V2 is equal to Q by C2, V3 is equal to Q by C3, and V is equal to Q by CS. What does CS represents? It represents the effective capacitance when the capacitors are connected in series. So substituting this in the above equation, we will get Q by CS is equal to Q into 1 by C1 plus 1 by C2 plus 1 by C3. So Q and Q gets cancelled. Finally, we will get 1 by CS is equal to 1 by C1 plus 1 by C2 plus 1 by C3. This is the equation for effective capacitance or resultant capacitance of capacitors connected in series, or I can say in the series connection the inverse of the equivalent capacitance, that is 1 by CS of the three capacitors connected in series is equal to the sum of the inverses of each capacitors, that is 1 by C1 plus 1 by C2 plus 1 by C3. This equivalent capacitance is CS in this case is always less than the smallest individual capacitance in series. So in series combination of capacitors, you have to remember that the charge remains the same but the potential varies, and you have to use this formula V is equal to V1 plus V2 plus V3. The next part we are going to see about capacitors in parallel. Consider three capacitors of capacitance C1, C2 and C3 connected in parallel with a battery of voltage V. Here the corresponding sides of the capacitor are connected to the same positive and negative terminals of the battery. Then such a connection is called as a parallel connection. In parallel connection, the voltage across each capacitor is equal to the battery's voltage. But in this case, since the capacitances are different, the charge in each and every capacitor is different. This diagram represents the connection of capacitors in parallel. In this case, the charge stored in each capacitor is different. The charge stored in C1 is Q1, C2 is Q2, and C3 is Q3 respectively. According to the law of conservation of total charge, the sum of these three charges is equal to the charge transferred by the battery to the capacitors. So in this case, V remains the same, but charge Q is equal to Q1 plus Q2 plus Q3. But we all know that Q is equal to CV. So we can write Q is equal to C1V plus C2V plus C3V. If these three capacitors are considered to form a single equivalent capacitance, see in this diagram, Cp represents a single equivalent capacitance which stores the same amount of charge, the total charge. I can write Q is equal to CPV. Substitute Q is equal to CPV in this equation. We will get CPV is equal to C1V plus C2V plus C3V. V gets cancelled on both sides. Finally, we will get CP is equal to C1 plus C2 plus C3. So, it is clear that when capacitors are connected in parallel, the potential will be same but the charge is different. So, from the final equation Cp is equal to C1 plus C2 plus C3, it is clear that the equivalent capacitance of capacitors connected in parallel is equal to the sum of the individual capacitance. The equivalent capacitance Cp in parallel connection is always greater than the largest individual capacitance. In a parallel connection, it is equivalent as an area of each capacitance adds to give more effective area, so that the total capacitance in this case increases. So you have to remember that when capacitors are connected in series, the charge remains the same, the potential will be different, and the final expression is 1 by C1 is equal, Cs is equal to 1 by C1 plus 1 by C2 plus 1 by C3. But in the case of parallel connection of capacitors, the potential remains the same, the charge differs, and the final expression for equivalent capacitance Cp is given as equal to C1 plus C2 plus C3. Next, we are going to see about distribution of charges in a conductor and action at points. First of all, we are going to see about distribution of charges in a conductor. You consider two conducting spheres. One is sphere A and another is sphere B. The sphere A has a radii R1 and sphere B has a radii R2 respectively. These two conducting spheres are connected by a thin conducting wire as shown in the diagram. And it is clear, it is understood that the distance between the two spheres is much greater than the radii of either of the spheres. So we have taken two spheres A and B. The sphere A has a radii of R1 and the sphere B has a radii of R2. They are connected by a small thin conducting wire. This combination acts as if the two spheres are connected in parallel. Now, if you introduce a charge Q to any one of the spheres, the charge we have given is redistributed in both the spheres such that the electrostatic potential is the same in both the spheres. So, when a charge Q is given to the spheres, the charge gets uniformly distributed. Charge gets distributed by both the spheres until the two spheres attain electrostatic equilibrium. After attaining electrostatic equilibrium, let Q1 be the charge residing on the sphere A and Q2 is the charge residing on the sphere B. It will be in such a way that the charge given Q is equal to Q1 plus Q2. Clearly understood that the two spheres have now attained electrostatic equilibrium. You all know that when the charged sphere is in electrostatic equilibrium, we have already already studied that the charges are distributed on the surface of the sphere and there is no net charge inside the sphere. I suppose you know this fact. Now this sphere A has an electrostatic potential and similarly the sphere B has an electrostatic potential. The electrostatic potential at the surface of the sphere A is VA is equal to Q1 by 4 pi epsilon naught R1. Similarly, the electrostatic potential at the surface of the sphere B is VB is equal to Q2 by 4 pi epsilon naught R2. Since the spheres has attained electrostatic equilibrium, the surface of these spheres is an equipotential surface. Since the spheres are connected by a conducting wire, the surface of both the spheres A and B together form an equipotential surface. This implies that VA is equal to VB. When you equate these two, VA and VB, and after cancelling 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught and 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught on both sides, we will get Q1 by R1 is equal to Q2 by R2. Let us take sigma 1 be the charge density on the sphere A and sigma 2 be the surface charge density on the sphere B. That is Q1 is equal to 4 pi R1 square into sigma 1. What is 4 pi R1 square? It represents the surface area of the sphere A and Q2 is equal to 4 pi R2 square. Here 4 pi R2 square represents the surface area of the sphere B. Therefore, when these I can write since the potentials are equal, instead of Q1 I can substitute 4 pi R1 square sigma 1 and instead of Q2 in this expression I can substitute 4 pi R2 square sigma 1. After substituting this, see sigma 1 4 pi R1 square by R1 is equal to sigma 2 4 pi R2 square by R2. Here in the left side R1 square and R1 by R1 becomes R1, 4 pi and 4 pi will get cancelled. Finally, after simplification we will get sigma 1 R1 is equal to sigma 2 R2, or I can conclude that sigma R is a constant, or I can say sigma is equal to constant by R, or sigma is inversely proportional to radius. That is, when the radius of the sphere increases, surface charge density decreases. That is, surface charge density and the radius of a conducting sphere are inversely proportional to each other. This is given as sigma R is equal to a constant. This is a very important equation. So it is clear that the surface charge density sigma is inversely proportional to the radius of the sphere. For a smaller radius, the surface charge density will be larger. That is, for smaller radius, more charges will accumulate at the region where the radius is smaller, and vice versa. That means for larger radius, the surface charge density will be less. That means for large radius, if the surface has a large radius, less number of charges will accumulate in that region. Next, we are going to see about action of points or corona discharge. You consider a charged conductor or like this. See, this charged conductor has no regular shape. In the previous case, we have taken into account of a sphere which has a uniform shape. But in this case, we have taken into account of a conductor which has a non-uniform shape. And here at the end A, is sharper than the end B. So when the end A is sharper, that means the radius of the end A is less than the radius at the end B. So here when this conductor having an irregular shape is given a charge, it is found that more charges will go and accumulate at the end which is having a less radius of curvature, because you already know that the surface charge density is inversely proportional to the radius. So it is given here That smaller the radius of curvature, the larger is the charge density. The end of the conductor which has a larger curvature, see this one, that is larger curvature means a smaller radius has a large charge accumulation. And as a result of this charge accumulation, what will happen means near this end electric field will be very large, and this electric field, a very large electric field in this region, will ionize the air in the surroundings. As a result of ionization of the air in the surroundings of this region, positive ions and negative ions will be produced. The positive ions are repelled at the sharp edge and negative ions are attracted towards the sharp edge. The attraction of the negative ions towards the sharp edge will reduce the total charge at the near the sharp edge. This reduces the total electric field of this conductor, and this phenomena is called action at points or corona discharge. You have all heard about lightning arrestor or lightning conductor. What is a lightning arrestor? A lightning arrestor is a device which is used to protect tall buildings from the stroke of the lightning. You must all know that the lightning arrestor was discovered by Benjamin Franklin. A lightning arrestor works on the principle of action at points. Action of points can also be called as a corona discharge. Let us next see about the working of a lightning arrestor. This diagram shows you the lightning arrestor, that is in a tall multi-storied building. The lightning arrestor is fixed at the top of the building. Actually, the lightning arrestor device consists of a long, see this is a lightning arrestor, and this device consists of a long thick copper rod, okay, passing through the top of the building to the ground. The upper end of the copper rod has a sharp spike or sharp needle like structure as shown in this. The lower end of the rod is buried deep to the ground along with the copper plate. Now during rainy season, when a cloud passes over the lightning arrestor, you all know that a cloud will contain either a negative charge or a positive charge of very high potential. When a negatively charged cloud passes over the building during lightning, the negative charges in the lightning will induce a positive charge on the spike, that is sharp points in a lightning arrestor, because of electrostatic induction. Since the induced charge density on the sharp spike is large, it results in corona discharge. That is, positive charges are induced in the spike. This positive charge will produce a very high electric field near the spike. As a result, the surrounding air get ionized and the positive ions or negative ions are produced. The positive ions neutralizes the negative charge in the cloud, and the negative ions of charge in the air molecules are pushed to the spike, passes through the copper rod, and it is carried over to the building without causing any damage to the building. And as a result, the charges in the cloud also get reduced. As a result, the effect of the lightning on the building will be avoided or prevented. In this way, a lightning arrestor helps us to prevent the damage caused by the lightning to multi-storied buildings. Next, Van de Graaff generator. This diagram represents the photo of a Van de Graaff generator. In 1929, Robert Van de Graaff designed a machine. And what is the use of this machine? The machine called Van de Graaff generator produces a large amount of electrostatic potential difference of the order of 10 power 7 volt. This device, that is the Van de Graaff generator, works on the principle of electrostatic induction and action at points. So this is very, very important. A Van de Graaff generator works on the principle of electrostatic induction and action at points. Let us now see the construction of a Van de Graaff generator. The Van de Graaff generator consists of a large hollow metal sphere. Okay, this is a metal sphere and this is shown here. It consists of a large hollow metal sphere, and the metal sphere rests on an insulator insulating pillar, and at the center of the pillar there is a pulley B, and below the pulley B at the ground level there is another pulley C. So there are two pulleys B and C, one fixed at the top and another fixed at the bottom. These two pulleys are connected by means of a insulating material, of a belt made of insulating material like silk or rubber, or I can say an insulating rubber belt or silk belt passes over the two pulleys. The belt is driven by an electric motor, and apart from that there are two comb shaped needles, one comb shaped E attached to the spear, and another combed shaped spear, so combed shaped part D which is connected to the lower part, and this combed shaped D at the bottom is connected to a positive potential, to a battery having a high potential of 10 power 4 volt. So this is the construction of a Van de Graaff generator. Now let us see the working of a Van de Graaff generator. You know that here there is a battery. The battery is giving a potential of order of 10 power 4 volt. As a result of the high potential difference, what will happen means the comb D will get highly charged. As the comb D has a large number of sharp points, the electric field in the comb D will be very large. And you know that yes, it is having a large number of sharp points. At the sharp points of the comb D, a large amount of charges will accumulate, and when this charged comb D is placed near this part of the pulley or this part of the belt, what happens means, because of electrostatic induction, positive charges will be the air surrounding this comb D will get ionized. As a result, positive charges and negative charges will be produced. The positive charges will get stick to the belt, okay, and the negative charges will go and neutralize the positive charge in the comb D. And when we rotate the pulley, with the help of a rubber belt, with the help of a motor, this as in this direction, the positively charged belt will move upwards, ascend upwards, and it will go to this side. When this positive charged belt comes to this side, what will happen means, because of electrostatic induction, negative charges will be induced in the comb E, and positive charges will be spread over the sphere because of electrostatic induction. Okay, now because of the negative charges in the comb E, as the comb E has a large number of spikes or large sharp points, it ionizes the air surrounding this comb E. So when the air gets ionized, the air gets split up into positive ions and negative ions. The negative ions go and neutralize the positive charge in the belt. So the belt becomes a neutral charge. At the same time, the positive charges will neutralize the negative charges in the comb. So both the charges get neutralized, and as a result, what happens means the charge on the sphere is distributed uniformly over the sphere. As a result, the sphere gets uniform charge distributed. Okay, as this process continues, when the belt descends, it has no more net charge. At the bottom, it again gains a large positive charge. The belt goes up and delivers the positive charge to the outer surface of the sphere. This process continues until the outer surface produces the potential difference of the order of 10 power 7, which is the limiting value. We cannot store more charges beyond this limit, since the extra charge leaks to the surroundings due to ionization of air. The leakage of charges can be reduced by enclosing the machine in a gas-filled steel chamber at very high pressure. temperature. The high voltage produced in this Van de Graaff generator is used to accelerate positive ions, protons and neutrons used for nuclear disintegration and other applications. Okay, so it is clear that the Van de Graaff generator works on the principle of electrostatic induction and action of points. Thank you.